welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today to our virtual session, which is part of the Youth Knowledge Forum, hosted by the Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Knowledge Foundation and in collaboration with the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP. For the past few days, the forum has been highlighting global knowledge, achievements, and youth success stories, providing young people with a platform to develop, share their knowledge around the world. And we're happy that this session will be the last session, and we're wrapping up with a very interesting discussion about youth and the SDGs. My name is Sara Chatila, and I lead on the communications and advocacy at the United Nations Resident Coordinator's Office for the UAE. I will be your moderator for today. And before we begin our session, I'd just like to remind you of a few things. The session is currently being recorded, and if anyone has any issue with that, please do let us know. The session, also the discussion will be in English, and we have simultaneous interpretation available for you in French and in Arabic. We will also be answering any questions you have towards the end of the session. So in the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them the discussion at the chat box in the Q&A, and the team will make sure to relay them to us. Also, if you're joining us from the social media platforms or from the lobby, we invite you to join the session and also share your questions, and we will make sure that we can also have our guest speaker answer them. You're also seeing on the screen that we have a few poll questions available, and please feel free to also share your insights. We'd like to know about your knowledge and if you are aware of the Sustainable Development Goals or the SDGs. So we'll have 3 questions, and we'll be revealing the results of the poll later during our discussion. And now to know more about how youth can become change agents in shaping a better future, and how youth can become agents and accelerators for a better world, allow me to introduce you to our guest speaker for today's session, Noha Hefny. Welcome, Noha. Noha is the founder. Thank you, welcome. Thank you for joining us. So let me just quickly introduce you to Noha before we hear from her. Noha is the founder and CEO of People of Impact, which is a social impact consulting and collaboration platform that highlights the SDGs. Noha has extensive years of leadership experience for more than 2 decades with multiple UN agencies and private sector companies as well. Throughout her work, Noha focuses on advancing women in youth issues, the SDGs, and reducing inequalities. So today we'll be discussing and diving deep with Noha about her personal experience, her journey, the role of youth in advancing the SDGs, and the People of Impact platform. So welcome, Noha, once again, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Sara, for the kind introduction, and thank you to the Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Knowledge Foundation and the United Nations Development Programme for inviting me to share my perspective on a topic of not only professional experience, as Sara detailed from my bio, but also of passion and of purpose that I've adopted since my youth. So I'm really delighted to be here and to be able to hopefully add value to all of you who are joining us from around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Noha. So let's get into the discussion. And the title of the session, as you may know, was to highlight the Sustainable Development Programme and the Sustainable Development Goals, of course, and the 17 goals. But we're also focusing on youth. And why are we putting that much spotlight on youth these days, knowing that, of course, we have the largest generation of youth in our history with more than 1.8 billion people between the ages of 10 and 24. So from your experience, why do you think it's important that we engage youth and bring them into the discussion when we talk about the 2030 agenda or the Sustainable Development Goals? And how can they play a more active role in engaging with the SDGs and raising awareness?
Thank you so much for the interesting question and the critically important one. And I would say the role of youth is not only important, but actually critical, primarily because of what you mentioned. 1.8 billion people around the world are young people between the ages of 15 and 24. So not capturing their insights, their perspectives, their voice into decision-making processes relating to sustainable development would be a missed opportunity. And so we need to tap into that potential, those ideas, and really leverage them to advance development. Youth are also a very powerful force for sustainable development. We've seen it around the world, with many of them either advocating for different SDGs and causes and social challenges that the world is confronting, or by starting innovations, whether as projects or as startups, to address critical societal challenges. And again, we need that force and that pool of talent to be able to help governments, help non-profit sectors, help private sector even, to address these massive challenges that no actor can address on their own. The other thing is the youth are the present and the future, and the entire SDG agenda, the Sustainable Development Goal agenda, was created, in order to sustain the resources of today for the future generation. And therefore, we absolutely need, as private sector, as governments, as NGOs, as media, to capture the voices of youth on this agenda. And they are also the future scientists, researchers, entrepreneurs, leaders. The workforce of the future will consist of 70% of the youth. And today, even the workforce of today consists of millennials, not really necessarily in that age bracket. But again, all are socially conscious, looking for social responsibility in organizations, looking for projects to engage in, with government to support the national development agendas. So it is really our responsibility to leverage that passion, that dynamism, and to gear it towards sustainable development. And last but certainly not least, I would say, this generation is the most digitally connected generation that has ever, that the world has ever witnessed. And again, there is so much power in using technology to advance social good. And therefore, I do not see any demographic group beyond the youth who will have the agility, the accelerated pace, the genuity of the ideas that they can bring to the table, leveraging technology and leveraging, innovation, to really advance the SDGs. So this is why I think it's important.
Absolutely, and so many great reasons that only enforce it even more. And there's a few things that you mentioned that I'd like to also build on. And you mentioned about the connectedness and the use of technology. And of course, we're seeing that nowadays technology has also enabled young people to be more involved in the discussion and be more aware of what is happening on a global level, so that it bringing people together. I mean, today we're having this discussion over Zoom, but we also have people joining us from social media. We have people waiting in the lobby from the platform, which is great to see that we're able to leverage on technology and such platforms that we can bring everyone together. And so speaking of that, and now that with young people being on these platforms, how can they use technology for good? And where do you see the role of technology when it comes to bridging the gaps and addressing socioeconomic inequalities and bridging that gap between the digital inequity in some sort?
Okay, obviously the SDG framework includes 17 goals, so I won't be able to address all the socioeconomic inequalities, but I'll pick some of the inequalities that, according to research, are important for young people, which is primarily education, and, for example, employment, and again, reducing the inequalities. These are areas that youth around the world, and even through surveys my organization conducted outside of the region, mainly in Brazil, China, and in other parts of the world, youth are telling us that these SDGs truly matter to them. So, for instance, technology can be used to bridge the inequalities in education. We know very well that the pandemic exacerbated progress on that particular SDG of education. And many children around the world are either not having the access to the education, teachers in developing countries having, for example, challenges to access resources in order to prepare their classes to enhance the quality of education. Again, EdTech, and we've seen trends, with many young people developing ventures that are focused on using technology to bring that access, to bring those resources to both students, teachers, and communities around the world that do not have access. So this is one example. Another one, as you rightly mentioned, Sara, remote work. So again, we've seen the rise, of this trend even before the pandemic. It was gaining popularity. We're seeing the rise of digital nomads, etc. The availability of technology to collaborate across border, opens up employment opportunities. The availability of ventures or companies that promote, job opportunities around the world, again, whether remotely or, full-time or remote, again, is opening up, exposure for work opportunities that people didn't know about before. So again, there are so many ways that these gaps are being bridged by technology. And as you said, we use Zoom and Teams today, just like, going to a meeting. And therefore, you can imagine the amount of collaborations, partnerships across border, and job opportunities being created through the technologies. Another important area is to look at, economic inequalities. So in countries where there is a lot of poverty, we are seeing the rise of fintech. A lot of startups are focusing on that. Some, I don't know how many in terms of percentage, are driven by youth. But again, these fintech ventures, many of them are helping people to learn how to become financially independent, how to, access or learn about the banking system, etc. But having said all that, I think it's very worthy to note that, we have 2.9 billion people around the world, which is 37% of the world's population today who does not have access to the internet. And in a digitally transforming world, these people risk to be left behind, and not accessing all the services, all the industries that are being transformed by technology. So here, there is a very strong call to action, for all stakeholders, starting with people and young people as well, who are working on projects, who are working on ventures, private sector companies, and really stakeholders across every sector to take this into account, that as we digitally transform the world, as we leverage the benefit of technology for development, how are we going to bridge the digital inequity that exists in the world? So I wanted to also close it at that.
Thank you so much for bringing that to light, because I think it's also a very important call to action that everyone has a role to play, and it's not only the role of organizations or the United Nations or the member states, but really it's about the collective efforts of everyone to bring action. And not only specifically also when we talk about the SDGs, because sometimes you meet people that are doing a lot of amazing work. Maybe they don't know that they are addressing the Sustainable Development Goals in one way or another. And on that, I just also want to remind our audience of the poll that we're running. We'd like to know about your knowledge of the Sustainable Development Goals. So feel free, if you haven't participated in our poll, please do put in your answers, and we will be revealing the answers shortly. And so before we get into the results of the poll, Noha, I'd also like to build on something that you mentioned, which is bringing in the entrepreneurs into the play. And now we're seeing that there's the term social entrepreneurship, bringing in innovation and trying and disrupting the ways that we've been doing things before, which clearly we've been having some setbacks. And if we want to accelerate and make progress toward 2030, we're realizing right now that something needs to change, and we need to rethink about the way we are approaching and tackling the social challenges. So in what ways do you feel that innovation and social entrepreneurship can be that push that we might need for the last decade of action?
So first of all, I think we need to look at where we are with the SDGs, and we are less than 6 to 8 years away. I don't know the exact number, but the deadline is nearing, and we have realized progress on several SDGs, but I think no matter how much effort has been put, we haven't reached, where we need to be at this stage of progress, and that, as you said, calls for a paradigm shift. And that paradigm shift, in my opinion, is bringing in non-traditional actors. And that means young people, entrepreneurs, creative people, putting, along with those who own these agendas, so the public sector, the NGOs, and also the private sector, who plays a critical role, and to take a systems approach, you know, in addressing all these challenges, because no actor will be able to, to address these challenges alone. The other thing is we need ecosystems and we need networks, and these need to be digital to be able to exchange, you know, information across borders. When we look at some of the challenges the world has faced, like the pandemic, if we look at, climate change, all of these are transboundary, they cross borders. And therefore, as a humanity, we need to collaborate together. We need to sit on the same table, and we need to hear new voices that can actually disrupt and innovate solutions that have not been born in the traditional system of addressing the SDGs. So I would say social entrepreneurship, in my view, is the solution for a better future. I think every organization in the private sector, whether a startup or not, should be a social enterprise integrating profit and purpose for the benefit of the world, integrating what's good for business with what is good for the world. And this is the only way that we can move forward, through partnerships across sectors, multi-stakeholder partnerships, and also adopting new business models that create shared value and that integrate profit and purpose. And social entrepreneurship in particular, is something that, I've been involved in as a social entrepreneur myself, establishing 3 ventures, including People of Impact, that I lead today, but also during my time in the private sector, supporting social entrepreneurship through a variety of programs, and particularly that driven by youth. So I would say my experience is, what I find is the benefit that social entrepreneurship brings in addressing social challenges is really, we drive as social entrepreneurs collective impact, and this is powerful. We are agile, we are innovative. The pace of bringing solutions to a country, a market, is much faster than, for example, in big organizations, whether private or public. The other thing is that we forge very successful partnerships, because any entrepreneur, whether social or not, will know that you cannot scale your project, your venture, unless you partner with others, and unless you leverage expertise, knowledge, technology, resources, optimizing the resources that you have along with that of others to scale your impact. And last but not least, you were talking earlier, Sara, about technology and how it's rising as a trend in, delivering social good. And I see, again, a lot in the social entrepreneurship field, a lot of social entrepreneurs really using technology not only as an enabler and a solution, for social challenges, but also as an equalizer to address inequalities. And we've used some examples of that earlier. And therefore, to close this, I do believe that social innovators, entrepreneurs, particularly the young people with innovative ideas, need to have a seat at the table, addressing different SDGs, and making their voice and their ideas heard on sustainable development.
Very well said. And I'm sure that a lot of the young people who are joining us today, who maybe some of them are entrepreneurs or aspire to be entrepreneurs, are definitely inspired by your response and will now make sure to address the SDGs, or also highlight social impact through their work if they're not doing that already. Because like you said, now it's a must, and it's not even an option anymore. And you also stress a lot about the importance of partnerships, which is also goal number 17 in the Sustainable Development Goals, power of partnerships. And because without that, without bringing in the resources and the knowledge of everyone together, we will not be able to move ahead and be able to achieve all the other 16 goals, which is why knowledge and sharing and innovation and partnerships is also our important element. So I don't know, Noha, if you're ready now maybe to share the results of the poll with the audience. We did get a lot of responses from the audience, and maybe we can share the results and discuss together.
Absolutely. So the first question was, are you aware of the SDGs? And we have 86% of our audience that is aware of the SDGs. It's actually an amazing result. We weren't really sure, Sara and I, preparing for this session, how many of you would have that awareness. So it's great. The second question was, are you implementing any activities or actions that advance the SDG or social impact? And again, there is an overwhelming response of 73% of our audience who are really actioning the SDGs and have projects or activities relating to that. Lastly, the last question was, which SDG are you most passionate about? And I cannot see, Sara, the answer. Can you see it on your screen?
Yeah, same. For question 3, I think we'll just maybe ask colleagues if they can share with us in the chat and we can address them. And then we have the 4th question, which is if they would like to be involved in SDG-related projects.
And yes, and here we have an overwhelming 96% of our audience who want and will make a difference, I would say.
So Noha, the team is telling me now that most of the answers were, the highest number of answers that we got were for SDG 4, which is quality education. And it's great and it's very relevant to where we are today, given the Youth Knowledge Forum. And the second one was SDG 13, climate action, which is also another very highly relevant SDG that we are also now talking more about, particularly in this region. And there's also SDG number 1, zero poverty. And I'm not sure if we've had other SDGs, but we have no favorites. I think all of them are equally important. And like you also mentioned earlier, all of it's a cross-cutting agenda, and we cannot achieve one goal without being able to achieve all of the others. So we need the Sustainable Development Goals is a blueprint. It's a guiding framework that will enable us to track and monitor our progress. But we cannot achieve one goal without achieving all of the others. And this is why it's also important to keep in mind the connectiveness, the connected value of these goals and the value that we bring together by moving forward with all of the goals. So thank you for participating in the call. And if you have any questions or follow-ups on what has been mentioned so far in the discussion, please make sure to mention them in the chat, and the team will also relay them to us, and we will be addressing them later in the session. If you're also joining us from social media or from the lobby, please also make sure to share your questions on these platforms as well. All right, so I think, Noha, now it's time to move a little bit into your personal experience. You've spent many years in the field and in multiple locations working with UN agencies such as UNHCR, UNESCO, and now with UN Women. Can you share with us some of the issues that you have come across personally during your time in the field? And what are some of the key elements that maybe could be useful for the youth to consider when designing solutions of their own or creating content for social impact?
Mm-hmm. So first of all, I'm so delighted to hear that SDG 4 education is coming up as one of the priorities for those joining us today. And the reason is, as you mentioned, I worked on the field in a refugee context. And I think the most powerful tool that you can actually give someone in their life is education. Because the minute you have an education, that opens doors to employment, that opens doors to opportunities. And without that, we cannot really uplift communities. So I think, again, critically important, and one of the issues that in the refugee context where I worked, as you mentioned, with UNHCR, both on the field and in offices across different countries, education was a critical issue to address, both in terms of access, both in terms of access, quality of education, quality of teaching, providing accessibility to resources, ensuring, retention of children in school. I mean, a lot of families in some countries would rather send their kids to work, particularly those, living in poverty-stricken areas, than sending them to school. And so we need to address these challenges, and that was one of the prominent ones. The other work, issues that obviously I got exposed to is gender inequalities. from all, having worked in the humanitarian, sector in the UN, again, if we look at all the socioeconomic issues that the SDGs address or that are being confronted across the world, the majority of those impacted are women and girls. And, we see that with climate action, we see that with education, we see that with hunger, poverty, you name it. It's always the women and girls who are the most impacted by these social challenges. So again, how can we bridge inequalities and really put the needs of women and girls, particularly those in fragile contexts and humanitarian settings, at the forefront? Because they need our support, they need solutions, and they need to have access to all sorts of opportunities. And, these can be provided by governments, but as people, and the SDGs being a universal agenda for all people, we have a role to play as well, whether by raising awareness, whether by, starting projects, starting enterprises, whatever it is that you can do to support those living in humanitarian context is going to be critical. So education, employment, really are cornerstones for sustaining livelihoods and achieving economic and financial independence for people. I would say for me as well, one of the issues I dealt with a lot is poverty and hunger. Food security is a critically important SDG. Poverty eradication again. And this is because these social dimensions of the SDGs versus others, not that they are more important, but if we cannot address the basic needs of people, like food, like shelter, like access to water, and if you hear the statistics and the numbers, I mean, they are heartbreaking. You have, more than 800 million people with no access to clean drinking water, more than 1.2 without access to electricity. These problems need to be addressed if we really want to see an equal, balanced, and sustainable world. It starts with these, I would say, in my view, let alone if we do not save the planet today as humans and as humanity, we will not have absolutely no place to live. So I would say, all these issues and many more, because this agenda is intersecting and interconnected, are critically important across the board. Whichever SDG you choose to work on, there will be a connection with one or more SDGs. So at the end of the day, as Sara said, I think all of them are equally important. But for me personally, and what is close to my heart is the social dimension, because this is where I see people struggling for basic needs that should not be denied to any human being in our world. So this is what I would say I've confronted. But I obviously also worked with a lot of unaccompanied minor refugees. And this was a life-changing experience for me, because these are children who arrive in countries without any family, without any support. And so as a humanitarian call to action, support each other as youth, regardless of status, or class. If you can teach someone a skill, if you can mentor someone else, if you can help them with a job application, there are many youth out there, you won't know that they are asylum seekers or refugees or migrants that need our support. Even if you're a young person and have gone through an experience, share it. This is critically important, the support networks and youth-to-youth support as well.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for sharing. And it's the peer-to-peer support, like you mentioned, which is also very critical. And we're seeing now a lot of organizations and even academia trying now to provide more programs that enable youth to develop the needed skills that would probably be useful for them when dealing with such issues. And of course, to be able to work in the field and be in this in the sector or industry, but it's also like confronting just like any other soft skills that you might need for any job. There are some qualities also that would be good to have as a young person to become a purpose-driven leader. So also looking back at your personal experience, you as a young person, you've also led and held multiple leadership experiences at a very young age. You were the regional director for corporate affairs and you were the youngest member of the executive regional leadership team at just the age of 13. So, of course, that also brings a lot of your interpersonal qualities that you had in you that enabled you or helped you achieve such roles. So what are some of the key interpersonal qualities that you would say would be useful for a young audience who are listening here today and want to learn from your experience? Some of the skills perhaps or the values that could be useful for them who want to be leaders, maybe not only in the future, but also today, and have their own projects and lead the change that they would want.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, Sara. And I personally pivoted 3 sectors. So from the UN to the private sector to social entrepreneurship and consulting. So to be honest, one of the key skills is to go out of your comfort zone when there is an opportunity and that you are passionate about, and not to be afraid of change. So, when I shifted from the UN to the private sector, for me, these were 2 systems with two very different set of values, norms, culture, pace, etc. But, I learned also from being on the field and from those changes that, as human beings, we surprise ourselves sometimes. We are highly adaptable. I remember the first time I landed in a field location, and I won't mention the country. I arrived there and I was like on an assignment with UNHCR, and I said, what did I do to myself? How am I going to survive here for 8 months? But the reality, the first day was difficult. There was no water, no electricity, no entertainment, right? You're in a remote area of the world just to do your job and to help people and communities. The reality is, after 1 week, this environment, right, became the norm, and you make the best out of it. It's all about your mindset. Do I have a growth mindset that can make the best out of every opportunity that is presented to me in my path or not? And, we also have to look at careers and life journeys as a trajectory that has ups and downs. There is no career trajectory, no matter how successful. If you read someone's bio and it has all these flashy names, great. But at the end of the day, behind this is many challenges, ups and downs, different stages of life. You might have even personal challenges at some points that will, take your career down. The idea there is, again, looking at all of this as a journey where, whenever it's the downtime, it's time to reinvent myself. It's time to upskill. It's time to really reconnect with my purpose and understand what's next for me and how do I reshape, my life and my future. So here, I think there are, when you have to make these difficult decisions, there are 2 very important aspects. One is knowing your values. And, I would say, this is something I thrive to talk to youth about a lot, because I think it's critically important. You need to know what you stand for, what you will not compromise no matter what. And once you know this, you will be able to make the best decisions in your life for your career, for your growth. And this applies to people of all ages, but I'm just highlighting it, that it's critically important for youth to understand, know their values. The second thing is purpose. I wish, to be honest, it's a dream of mine, that purpose would be taught to young people from school age, from high school, because I feel that it would help resolve, for many people and many young people who graduate, they don't know what to do, which path to take, which career to choose. Again, if you know your purpose, it's progressive, it always evolves, but you will know which opportunities are for you, which are not. And I would say going out of your comfort zone, going to places that you think are going to be difficult, going to assignments that you feel are going to be, challenging, you're not sure if you can make it. You will be surprised how well you can navigate and how many people learn by the experience. And the last thing, the same way you go to work or you start a venture or a project and you build a strategy for these things and a roadmap, build the roadmap for your own life, and have clarity on your vision. Where do you want to go in the future? What is your mission in this world beyond being who you are? why do you exist? Why, what are you going to give back? What are your talents and gifts, and how are you going to use them to be of service? And then the last thing is having objectives, because you can dream about the future, you can connect with your purpose, but if you don't have set goals with time-bound objectives to achieve on different levels, you're not going to go very far, and you will be demotivated. So set smart goals and achieve them slowly towards your passion. And last but certainly not least, I would say, if you choose a social impact, humanitarian, sustainability career, you have to be passionate about these causes. You cannot do this career without the passion for the issues that you want to drive. And last but not least, this sector also requires a lot of diplomacy, tact, patience, and resilience. So, it is not, there are many challenges, there are many issues. The issues are big and grand and at scale. They need people who are willing, to take it till the end and to solve these very complex issues and to work with others to do that. So build that resilience within yourself if you want to also join a sector like that. This is what I wanted to share, actually.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think there's a lot of very valuable lessons that have been mentioned here. So I hope the audience have been taking notes, and I'll maybe try and bring back some of the things that you mentioned, Noha, just to also make a list. So you mentioned that agility is very, very important, to be flexible, adaptable to any environment. It's not a linear path, absolutely not. You will always go through ups and downs, but the importance is to learn from it and to keep moving forward, which is why it's very important to have a purpose, to know what you want, stay true to your values, and make sure that you are aligned with your values and with your purpose along every step of the way. It also takes a lot of resilience and diplomacy, especially if you want to be part of doing something for the greater good, which is also, it comes from the heart and from the passion, and always doing things that align with your passion and wanting to do things that are more connected to our community and society. So not only for personal reasons, but also to have reasons that we want to create a better world and bring forward all of these social impact benefits to the world. And last but not least, I think Noha also mentioned the importance of having a roadmap, strategizing. And I think perhaps this also is very important in any career, to have a strategy for your life and put forward smart goals and things that you can achieve and make sure to track. Noha, did I miss anything?
Not at all. Not at all. Thank you, Sara.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I've been relating a lot with everything that you mentioned. And even though I still believe that I'm very early on in my career, but I think it's very important for young people to realize that at a very early age, even for students, to start having that and really start leading the life that they want and creating the value at every step of their way. And not only wait until they are in a leadership position or in a certain role to be able to create change, but everyone at every step of the way can create change, and it starts within your circle. So we're getting a lot of interesting questions, and I want to make sure we have enough time for that. But before we do, speaking of your journey, everything that you have done has led you today to establishing your social enterprise, People of Impact. And can you tell us more about how you were able to establish this and transform it from just an idea to a vision to an actual platform and a network that is bringing people of impact, and what has been some of the challenges, but also some of the insights that you have so far from this experience?
Okay, so basically People of Impact relates to a lot of what we talked about today. The need for multi-stakeholder collaboration, the fact, for example, it stems out of my journey and my passion being, in several field locations, seeing small NGOs and nonprofits, having no access to knowledge, resources, training, for example, that can enable them to scale their impact. It's linked to my interaction with young people around the world who want to make a difference, but they need mentorship. They don't know how to start. They want to start a project, but again, how do I do it, and who can I talk to? And so it's People of Impact, addresses really the problem of the lack of knowledge, networks, and funding for social projects. So by creating a social network and ecosystem that brings everyone together, the private sector, the government, the United Nations, individual people who are passionate about impact, and hopefully put them in co-creation sessions that can ideate solutions for social impact, give them access to learning programs about social impact and the SDGs, collaborate with others on panel discussions that can raise awareness, and co-design projects and solutions ultimately to address different causes. However, I have to also humbly say, we are a startup, we are very small, we are self-funded, we are still at the very, very initial stages of our development, but we hope one day that we can show the world that a social network can mobilize people and organizations to become a force for good in the world. So this is our aim, building those mindsets that can drive, sustainable development and economies forward. Maybe if I don't know how we are on time, but if we do have a few minutes, I'd be more than happy as well to share a short 2-minute video with everyone.
Yes, sure, we can sometime, yeah. Thank you for sharing. And can you tell us a bit more, Noha? First of all, amazing work is being done, so congratulations for you and the team on this. But also maybe a question that a lot of the audience will be wondering, is it, can anyone become people of impact? Can anyone join the platform? And is it restricted to one region in the world, or is it open for anyone and from everywhere? And how does the selection process? Can you walk us through a bit more about the process for people to join?
Absolutely. So we are an open platform. It's global. It's open to all people of the world. We even have people joining us from tribes in Africa, but they are all people of impact, actually driving awareness on climate or working on women empowerment or other issues. We have social innovators. So it's open to everyone. It's a social network, just like Facebook or LinkedIn, but focused primarily on social impact. Does that answer your question, Sara? It's global, it's accessible, it's for free at the moment. We haven't monetized it because we want to leave no one behind. So we want to give access to any person around the world who's passionate about social impact. There are a couple of projects that we are running with youth across universities around the world and organizations that we partner with. So it's a place to exchange knowledge, best practices globally across countries. It's a place where we launch our own webinars. We had, for example, a panel on youth and climate action, bringing in young innovators actually working on climate across different geographies, from Asia to Europe to the Middle East, India. So we really curate our events very carefully because we are practitioners in the field, so we want to bring the best knowledge. We run, for example, co-creation sessions, which are very much about design thinking, where we bring different stakeholders to ideate or provide insights or ideas, idea crowdsourcing around different SDGs. And there will be more to come. We have partnered with several organizations to upskill young people, for example, in disadvantaged communities. And I just want to highlight, we are a social enterprise. We are not an NGO and nonprofit. So all of our service and access to our network is indeed free. However, there are events, learning programs, and other activities that would be at a cost. And last but certainly not least, we also are consultants on social impact and the SDGs. So all these services we offer to organizations are also on consulting basis. So this is who we are at this stage. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. And it's a very collaborative platform at the end of the day, and we can see your vision being translated in that platform. If anyone has any other questions about people of impact, feel free to also address them. And perhaps, Noha, maybe you can also share the website at the chat on the chat if anyone would like to learn more. And for the sake of time, we can also move now to the discussion. We've been receiving a lot of questions, but also a lot of positive comments, which certainly a lot of what Noha has shared has inspired a lot of the members and the audience joining us today. Thank you for that. Thank you for tuning in, for listening, for also sharing with us that you will be taking in the learnings and sharing them with your peers, with your students, with your network. I think this is, it really makes us happy to see that we've achieved the objective of this session, is to spark a conversation and also action. So maybe some of the questions that we've been receiving, Noha, is talking more about the Arab world specifically, or because a lot of the challenges are also common with other parts of the world. What still needs to be done to combat fragmentation and maybe have a bit more of a more strategic and efficient and fact-based action when we're tackling social issues, and especially in the Arab world, but also why does this, like youth in the Arab world, how can they make a difference in their own region?
Mm-hmm. So, similar to every region, I don't know the person who's asking the question, which country they are from, but I think the starting point is to understand, working on the SDGs, in my view, starts local and then translates globally. Like, for example, in the case of my venture, I've been living in the UAE for 16 years. It's my second home. I've been inspired by the progress, the innovation, etc. And For instance, again, that inspires my venture to build something global, to bring collaborations from across the world on one platform. So again, I would say the starting point is to understand what are the local challenges. So first, identify the one SDG or two SDGs that you want to address. Then look at the local context. Where are the gaps from the data available publicly and online with government platforms, with the UN, etc. Once you understand the actual problem and the gap, then you can develop an idea, and here there's a couple of things that we really need to take into account. One is my idea relevant culturally and from an impact standpoint to the communities that it's going to serve? This is one aspect that is really important, because a lot of people assume that what they're building, the solution they're building or the idea they have is the best idea in the world. Founders are like this. I was like this as well. But the reality is you need to talk to people. You need to create needs assessments. You need to identify who really your segment that you're serving is, beneficiaries and customers if you're building a social enterprise. And validating your idea is not about what you believe in, but actually what are the needs of these people? What pains and challenges are they facing, and how can your solution address it? So for the Arab world, I wouldn't say it's any different. The challenges are similar than in the rest of the world. I mean, you have an education crisis because of the Syrian refugee crisis, where many kids are left out of school. We need edtech solutions. We need all sorts of solutions to address this the education gap. You have gender inequalities because, again, with the exception of the UAE, that is #1 in the region on gender equality. In other countries, there are wide gaps and inequalities facing women and girls in terms of all various sectors, economic empowerment, political participation, and the list goes on. You need to study this. You need to start with data. And data can be collected by talking to stakeholders across the board who impact your venture, your project, your idea, all the way to using the reports and the data that exists. That's #1. You cannot build something solid without having a solid picture of the problem you're dealing with. And you need to eliminate all the assumptions about it and then build your idea. And once you test your idea, test it quickly so that you can also pivot quickly. Because sometimes we've done all that research and we go out to the market or the community with the idea that we want to bring. And we realize that, there is no engagement, there is no traction. Maybe I need to be offering something different. So for example, in People of Impact right now, we are conducting focus groups with all of our users to really identify how we can create value for them even further, and why they joined us. For example, in the beginning, what are they searching for? So being an entrepreneur, addressing the SDGs through social innovation is an ongoing journey of learning, refinement, and continuous improvement. The key criteria for success here, I would say, are, if you're going to work on social innovation or entrepreneurship projects that address the MENA region issues, you need to make sure they are impactful, sustainable, scalable. If you can also build something replicable that other geographies in the world can actually use as a best practice and replicate, that would be even, outstanding. And, these are core criteria. And last, to be culturally relevant. Yes, I can, take innovations from the West to the region, but are they relevant? Do the people accept them? Do they align with the local needs and culture and national development priorities? So I would say the first thing, understand the government vision and direction and see how your idea can fit into that, and then build a sustainable business model that can actually drive a solution forward.
Absolutely. Yeah. And definitely, we talk a lot about social issues, but I think we also need to share more best practices. There's a lot is being done around the world that we need platforms that enable knowledge sharing and facilitating also success stories that we can inspire from. And like you said, adapt them into our own needs, but there's a lot of similarities that we face across the world with multiple regions that we can always learn and benefit from and create more collaborative roles as well. So thank you for mentioning that. And speaking of synergy and aligning with government strategies, we also have another question about how can the private sector align more with the government and with international organizations or civil society on the Sustainable Development Goals and a 2030 agenda.
Okay, this is a topic of passion because I used to drive corporate sustainability in a corporate setting before in a large multinational. And here I want to say a couple of things. So number one, we really have to be intentional and honest about this agenda. So what I mean to say now is the ESGs and the pressure from shareholders and investors to be ESG compliant. You know, all the companies are trying to look for solutions, trying to see how they can report best, how they can comply, you know, and sometimes there is a tick the box approach. We need to steer away from that. What we need to do is an intentional design and redesign of our business strategies to truly embed sustainable development in the core fabric of our business strategy. And only then can we truly see a tangible impact. So the first step is really, again, identifying which SDGs intersect with our business, which SDGs do we want to drive, which sustainable development issues are we going to be a catalyst for. Once we know that, you know, how do they integrate with the business? You need a value proposition that is strong enough to convince and seek, you know, garner buy-in of your leadership to actually adopt such an agenda. I mean, I know a lot of sustainability officers who struggle to secure the budgets to drive, for example, sustainability in their organizations. So what you need is top leadership commitment. You need an intentional design of business strategy that integrates sustainable development and specific SDGs and aligns them to business in a relevant way that drives performance, innovation, retention, all the KPIs, the business KPIs that businesses care about. And last but certainly not least, which, you know, I see in some organizations, but not broadly enough, to be honest, is measurement and transparency and disclosure. So yes, we want to report to our shareholders and investors, but, you know, what are we reporting on? Are we being transparent about these metrics, you know, and what are the underlying points that go into that? So without being data-centric, measuring, evaluating, and constantly, again, refining, I don't think that these strategies are really genuine or effective, and I think this needs to change. So if we want to drive sustainable development and align that to business, it needs a holistic and an integrated approach that is fully integrated into the fabric and into the business strategy of any organization for us to truly see, you know, an impact on the targets of the SDGs and other social impact frameworks. But, you know, a lot of companies are well-intentioned, they want to make a difference, but again, is it measurable? You know, how long does it take? Do you have the right resources behind these efforts? So all of these top leadership commitments, strategic integration, resourcing this agenda for it to succeed, and then forming as well the alliances that you need in order to make it happen. Because as an organization in the private sector, you need the NGOs, you need the government, you need all these different stakeholders that impact the SDGs of choice. So again, are we forming these alliances? Are we relying on insights external to the business as well? And last but not least, stakeholder consultations. So in the beginning, to design the strategy, and in the end and in the middle as well, to see if we're on the right track, if we're meeting these different stakeholder expectations. And the complexity in business is that these expectations are so, you know, they're multiplied across different stakeholder groups, shareholders and investors with the ESGs and more. You have your customers or consumers, if you're a consumer-facing business. You have your employees who also expect you to deliver on those things. You have the media, which looks at your corporate reputation and how genuine, for example, an organization is. Is it greenwashing? Is it this? Is it, you know, living up to all these responsibilities that it claims it does? So, and you have the communities, which are also the most important stakeholders. So again, how do you create a strategy that meets the different stakeholder expectations, creates shared value across the board, and delivers real impact that is measurable, reported in a transparent way? And I think that's what I can say. It's not easy, and it's also a progressive journey. And there are honestly many businesses around the world who have taken that journey, but the successful ones are willing to boldly communicate that, where they are, and when they fail, they are willing to also transparently communicate that and explain how they are amending the areas that they haven't met their agenda. And this is when we see true, genuine intention to drive sustainable development or sustainability into a business.
Yeah, this is very important. And you also mentioned about data and reporting, and this has been the spotlight of the discussion also of the Youth Knowledge Forum for the past few days, with the Knowledge Index report that has been shared, and where the government but also working with private sector and with communities together to be able to pull data and to measure and report on it in a transparent way. And also maybe one thing to mention on the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda is that it has also been put in a way by the member states in such a way that enables member states, but also stakeholders to effectively report on their progress for the Sustainable Development Goals, so that you have 17 goals. Within each goal, you also have indicators and sub-indicators. We have a total of 169 key indicators that enable to look into the progress that has been done within each and every single goal to help and put this guideline forward. Of course, as Noha mentioned, there's a lot that still needs to be done, and this is where also the role of technology comes in and innovating on efficient tools and resources that will enable us to track and measure this impact in a more efficient way. I'm very aware of the time, but we do have one last question, which is a bit more relevant actually to this region and to what we have been discussing for the past few months perhaps, which is about COP27 and COP28. So for those who are not aware, COP27 is the climate change conference. It's the largest UN climate change conference that takes place every year. And earlier in November, it has been hosted by Egypt, which is why we refer to it as the Conference of the Parties of the 27th session, COP27. And this year and next year in 2023, the UAE will be hosting the next Conference of the Parties, which will be COP28. The question in particular puts a lens on youth and climate action. And we saw how the role of youth has become more monumental in the climate action discussions, and also playing a more active role in such conferences. So my question to you, Noha, in a more broader context is, we're talking about the SDGs, and we're also talking about, youth accelerating action. But why is it important to leverage on such global platforms, global initiatives, conferences, programs as well that bring in all the stakeholders and leaders from the world? Why is it important to put forward the voices of youth and have them be also on the front lines of such discussions?
I think, again, going back to the very first question, as 1.8 billion of the world, they need to be heard as the custodians of the future, and the efforts that we're all putting into advancing the SDGs today, they will be on the receiving end of our actions. The decisions we make today are going to impact the youth. Therefore, we need to shape these with the participation, full and active participation of the youth. The other thing is that the youth have different perspectives that adults actually cannot have or access for different reasons, because they are connected, because they deal with a specific generation. Those intergenerational perspectives to design solutions are critically important. And last but certainly not least, I can also say, and in the interest of time, I'll make this very short, around the world, youth have developed solutions. They're not about to develop or still trying to figure out. They are advocating climate action. They are developing enterprises. They are creating youth networks that can collaborate to deliver action. And therefore, there's a lot of value in tapping into this, the power of collective ideas, the power of fresh perspective, the power of innovation. If we were able to solve for the SDGs in the same traditional ways over the previous years, I would say it's not that critically important, but we haven't. And therefore, we need to open to these non-traditional actors, including young people, including women, innovators, creative people even, who can actually depict issues in a more simplistic way and give us, a way forward around solutions. So we need that disruption to happen. And I don't see it happening except through the leadership and full participation of youth. And last but not least, it is our duty and responsibility to raise the awareness. I mean, when youth get engaged in these dialogues, and I remember I was in Model UN and so many other programs that raised my awareness about the Millennium Development Goals at that time. But this, this awareness that you gain by participating in these forums, by having your voice heard, by ideating with others, etc., that in the future creates socially responsible leaders, global citizens who want to address these global challenges that I don't believe by 2030 are going to be over. So we will need that leadership. And if we don't build it today, I don't know when we will. However, I have to admit, and I want to close with this, youth have the energy, the power, the ideas, the access to the technology, everything, like that is needed to address the SDGs. And however, unless we give them access to knowledge, tools, opportunities, so they can thrive. And when I say tools, knowledge, and opportunities, I mean including those in disadvantaged communities, access to education, access to employment opportunities, because there is a high level of youth unemployment in the region, okay? And, access to, platforms, whether in the public sector or in the private sector, to voice their opinion, capture their insight. There is no way that they will thrive in addressing the SDGs. So unless we create these opportunities, we create these platforms, we fund and dedicate resources to youth projects, we leverage the research papers that many university students are developing around the SDGs, and we use them to really shape our projects, our decisions, our solutions, our policies. I don't think there will be a strong and proactive youth engagement. So this is what I really hope to see in the future, and hopefully it will materialize. I'm very excited about COP28 and many other platforms that are being launched, and that hopefully will fully leverage. I know for sure that in the case of COP, they will fully leverage the engagement of youth. So looking forward to it.
Thank you, Noha, for sharing, and it's a very powerful way to end the session on a very high note. And also, maybe just to add, of course, it's as important to provide youth with the opportunities, but it's also important that youth also are proactive and look out for opportunities, and they will find them. And do not wait for things to come handed out to you, but go out and seek opportunities, and you will find the right platforms, you will find the right people, you'll find the right networks and skills that will get you there. And you need to also create your own opportunities if you don't even find ones. So I also want to leave the floor for you, Noha, to share any final thoughts before we wrap up the session.
No, I just wanted to address one last question in the Q&A, because I think it's important. It's coming from one of the young people joining us, which is, we don't have access to funding. How can we support this agenda or do anything? The reality is funding is the last thing you need to worry about. Start small. And when you have an idea, don't wait to perfect it. Talk to people about it, build your network, find partners, find advocates who will advocate for you or sponsor your idea. And don't be afraid to ask for help from people who are already engaged in similar ideas, or SDG advocates or social impact leaders. They want to support the youth, but often we don't have visibility on your ideas and your projects because the youth are hesitant to share until it's perfect. Don't perfect. Excellence is enough. If you have an idea, start it as soon as possible. Don't wait, because you can either succeed or fail fast and start something else, or you never know, someone you might talk to might actually fund your idea. So don't always put the obstacles before the innovation or the idea that you want to do. So I want to also just wrap up with this thought, because funding is important. It's available with governments, it's available with the private sector through sponsorship, etc. And it will come if you have conviction and belief, and if you build the right support network for your idea. So I just wanted to address that Q&A question, because I think a lot of young people struggle with the funding piece.
Absolutely, it's very important. So thank you for highlighting that and for bringing in all of these valuable insights to share with the audience here. So with that, we have reached the end of our discussion. We thank you all very much for joining us today. This is actually the last virtual session from the Youth Knowledge Forum, and we're very happy to be concluding this discussion with such an inspiring leader such as yourself, Noha. Thank you so much for joining us today, for sharing your insights, for being very transparent with us on sharing your personal journey, your experience, but also bringing all of these valuable advice and ideas and suggestions and thoughts with the young people, which I'm sure there's been a lot that we can take away from the session that we can also implement, share with our peers, and make sure that we continue with this conversation and take action. I'd also like to thank Mohammed bin Rashid Knowledge Foundation and the United Nations Development Programme, our colleagues at UNDP, for hosting us today and for organizing these amazing and inspiring series of discussions with leaders and thought leaders and knowledge experts. And we also like to thank our audience for taking the time to joining us today and engaging with us in the discussion. And we hope we are able to also highlight some of the key areas and bring in the discussion on youth and the Sustainable Development Goals. So Noha, thank you very much once again for joining us today and for all your time and insights. And also we'd like to remind people that they can learn more about People of Impact, join the platform, and carry on the conversation offline.
Thank you very much, Sara, and thank you very much, UNDP and Mohammed bin Rashid Knowledge Foundation for the invitation. And thank you all for joining us today for this conversation, and looking forward to continue the conversation post this. Please feel free to reach out on LinkedIn if you have any additional questions that weren't addressed today.
Great. Thank you everyone for joining, and hope you enjoy the rest of the day and wherever you are around this world. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you, Noha.
Thank you.